Welcome to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, bringing baby boomers proven strategies and innovative products for getting fit, staying fit, so you can live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Here's your host, best-selling author and fitness advocate, Phil Ferris.
This is Phil Ferris, and welcome to our show. Never Too Late for Fitness Radio provides answers and straight talk about fitness, nutrition, and healthy lifestyles for people over 50. Our goal is to educate and advocate health and fitness strategies that help you to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. My guest today is Dr. Ryan Comeau, CEO and co-founder of a company called Kinetisense that is located in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Kinetisense is the world's first markerless 3D motion capture analysis tool that allows human performance and rehabilitation practitioners to objectively assess biomechanics in real time. It has the software of choice for many world-leading professional sports organizations, research, health, and wellness clinics. And one of the reasons that I'm excited to interview Dr. Comeau is that the company helps people move better. If you move better, you'll feel better. If you feel better, you'll move more. And if you move more, you'll live longer and healthier. And as we know, this is especially true for people over 50. So thank you for being on the show, Dr. Comeau.
It's my pleasure, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Now, if you could give a little introduction or background about yourself and your company and the journey that you went through to bring your product to market.
Absolutely. So I am a doctor of chiropractic by trade, and really the conception or the idea of Kinetisense, it started about 4 years ago when I was in my last year of university studies, and was in a biomechanics course. And I remember quite clearly the biomechanics professor standing in front of the class and pulling out an old little plastic tool and explaining to my classmates and myself that these little tools have been around for over 150 years, but yet they are the gold standards that are used today for assessing biomechanics. And then continued to explain how these tools, the goniometer and inclinometer is what they're called, really are inaccurate and lack a lot of accuracy, especially when you're looking at between practitioners, so from practitioner to practitioner. So this really started the ball rolling in my goal of trying to find a better solution and looking into how practitioners and trainers assess movement, and what kind of impact this has on the patient through this process of assessment. And it was quite amazing to me when I started to dive into the research that over 75% of practitioners, we're talking medical doctors, physiotherapists, chiropractors, simply eyeball their assessments, meaning that they use no tools at all to try to look for improvements in range of motion or posture, functional movement, and that was startling to me. Really, we talk about how medicine and rehabilitation is supposed to be so evidence-based. We look at factors such as medical, legal, motor vehicle accidents, where having data is everything. And yet we're not assessing in an objective manner. And this became a very important thing for me to investigate and really try to find a better solution. And it was around that time where we were looking at different wearable solutions. We were looking at different technologies where we could, help to make this an objective and efficient analysis for practitioners. And we came across the Kinect camera, which is the Xbox Kinect camera created by Microsoft. And we realized that the system was quite accurate, especially with proper algorithms and customized algorithms. We can make our system very, very accurate and assess movement of all three planes of movement without having to use wearable markers. And this was something that was very important to the practitioners that we were speaking with when we were talking about this concept. Is it had to be fast, it had to be objective, and it had to have very high efficiency. So we then found a development team in Athens, Greece, and that's our CTO of Kinetisense, Vangos Paternius, who's one of the top Kinect developers in the world. And we developed a team. We developed a team of practitioners. We developed a team of developers and started to put things in place to develop Kinetisense, starting off as a range of motion tool for assessing joint range of motion, quickly progressing to a 3D posture analysis system, to a balance analysis system, and now a functional movement system.
So you've kind of took your background as a chiropractor and then said, let's use technology as a method to get a better way of assessing movement range of motion with your perspective with your clients and patients. Now, one of the cornerstones of kind of fitness or rehabilitation, even training for peak performance, is doing a functional movement assessment. Can you drill down a little bit about how that's currently being done using those antiquated tools, and why doing that assessment is so important to both the practitioner and the client? Absolutely.
And you know what? I just want to go back to the introduction, Phil, where you mentioned how movement really is everything, and it is, and especially in our population that's over the age of 50. We start to see a decline in some of the functional movements that we should be able to do. After the age of 50, we start to lose the ability to do things like hip hinge. We start to lose strength in the hips, mobility. These different things that put us at risk of falls or not being able to do the daily activities that we normally love to do. So with Kinetisense, we want to remember that function is always on a scale. And it doesn't matter what your age is. You're either moving towards a better function as it pertains to movement, or you're moving towards worse function, so to speak. And up to this point, there have been assessments that are standardized to look at, where do you fit on that scale? Are you high function with movement, low function with movement, and being able to try to follow those patterns based on multiple assessments. So up till this point, these functional movement assessments, for the most part, have been done visually. And what this means is that the practitioner will take that patient through a series of movements or tests, and we'll try to eyeball and figure out what the score for each one of those movements is. Kinetisense, trying to add objectivity to this, we collect over 2,000 data points of the body, and we look at how the body reacts in all planes, and we look at all joints as a person goes through motion. We look at things like power, we look at things like balance, and then with this type of technology, a couple things. We get a standardized assessment, so one practitioner is going to score the same in Canada that they would score that same patient in Germany or Europe, which then leads to better diagnosis of movement deficiencies and a better prescription of movement rehab, leading to overall improved treatment, overall improved care, and overall improved results. The other great thing about this, because it's standardized using an assessment tool like the Kinect camera, is that we can start to look at some of this data that's never been collected before and start to get insight on how function diminishes over time, and how some of the correctives that we can employ can help to improve function.
Okay, can you give a couple of examples of the types of assessment people might do and how the Kinetisense product helps provide better data for those specific examples?
Absolutely. Speaking of functional movement specifically, the most well-known assessment that's out there today is called the Functional Movement Screen, or FMS. So what would happen with this, it's a series of movements that the practitioner will have the patient go through, and looking for deficiencies and scoring, and it's somewhat of a workflow or a chart that the practitioner goes through as the person goes through the movements. And like I said, very, very subjective, and can take anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes to go through the workflow. Because this is such a time-consuming assessment, a lot of practitioners will skip valuable steps. And this obviously leads to increased subjectivity, and at the end of the day, the objectivity of the assessment really goes downhill. In regards to looking at balance, which is a functional movement, and I'll tie this in with the over 50 group. One of the important things for over the age of 50 is balance, and as it pertains to reducing risk of falls. And right now, that's a functional movement balance that is being assessed visually in hospitals and clinics. Kinetisense is able to get that objective data and score balance, which allows us to know trends. And that's the most important thing about having objective data is trends. We can look and see if someone's balance is improving, someone's balance is diminishing. We can look to see if someone's function is improving, someone's function is diminishing, and be able to make the proper decisions at the proper times from a clinical standpoint to be able to increase their function, keep the person moving, reduce their chance of fall, and keep them from potentially fracturing a hip or something like that, which can have very dire consequences. So it's the same. We look at our functional movement screen that is being used by currently right now the Miami Heat. They're looking at function from a performance standpoint of a NBA athlete, but our 65-year-old who wants to keep playing golf, it's no different. They're just on a different part of that spectrum, and all we want to do is make sure that we get a baseline and that we move them towards better function.
Well, if a person does have a movement dysfunction, how does that affect their ability, their day-to-day life, or how does it affect their ability to perform in golf or tennis or some other activity where you're, in accelerated movements?
Absolutely, and really, when we look at the neuromuscular system, so that's the nervous system, which, the brain, the nerves, we look at the soft tissue like the muscles, all of the components, the bones, the joints that allow us to do a movement. There are strategies that are better than others when it comes to movement. You look at, the movement of going into a squat or having someone, an elderly person, go to sit down on a chair. Are they using their glutes and their hamstrings to perform this movement, or is it a movement that's mainly done by the quads and the anterior chain muscles? So compensation is really the word. Are we compensating over the span of our lifetime? Do we have injuries? Do we have weak core muscles? Do we have weak glute muscles? Glutes are the number one stabilizer of the pelvis. Do we start to compensate because we don't move enough, right? In this day and age, many of us spend too much time sitting, and that deconditions the body. It puts our body into compensation, and when we're in compensation, the core muscles don't work anymore to hold us up, so we have to recruit other muscles. The brain will find other pathways or other muscles to get the job done, and that's where Kinetisense, with our system, we look at these movements, we look at all the compensation patterns, and we figure out, okay, this person may have knee pain, but is it stemming potentially from their hip, or is it coming from their ankle? Or maybe they don't have enough glute strength and they're using too much of their quads. So that's really where we find out where these compensations occur, what the risk of injury is for these people, and where they fit on that spectrum. And then based on that, being able to take them through corrective strategies to improve that. I'll go back to risk of fall. one of the number one predictors for risk of fall in the population over 65 years of age is atrophy of the glute muscles, weakness of the glutes. So we can actually take someone, put them through a squat test and see how their body reacts and how the different joints react to try to accommodate or to compensate. And that's where the rubber hits the road, because if we can start to strengthen the glutes, we can then strengthen their balance, their golf swing, what have you, and then performing daily activities of life or sports, or simply trying not to fall. That's how we can improve their overall function.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I'm 69. I still play a lot of tennis, but a while back I had some knee issues, a slight tear of the meniscus, and we decided not to do surgery. But I was starting to compensate, and from that compensation, it was causing problems in my lower back, which was causing problems in my opposite leg. And so I had to go in and get that corrected, because the body will adapt perfectly to an imperfect situation, so that it will continue to do something wrong, and it causes that imbalance that will cause more problems. So the quicker and easier you can get that assessed and then corrected, the faster people can get back onto recovery. Now, in the intro, I said that Kinetisense was the first markerless 3D motion capture tool. Now, a lot of people may not know what that really is. Could you explain it and why it's so important for your practitioners?
Absolutely, yeah, and really, when we're looking at when I started to do research as to why many of these practitioners decide not to use gold standards of assessment tools to get numbers, and like I said, 75% of these practitioners simply eyeballing their assessments, I started to look into why. And really the reason why is that in a practitioner's day-to-day workflow, so to speak, anything that will slow them down in their workflow because they need to be efficient, they tend to move aside or not use in their clinic. So that's why the goniometer and inclinometer, these tools that are considered to be gold standards up until now, aren't being used by 75% of these practitioners, because they're just too slow. They would rather just eyeball the assessment, even though it's more subjective. So there's this trade-off. And what we're seeing is this trade-off between efficiency and objectivity. And that is why certain practitioners are using tools and some aren't. So our goal was to try to figure out a solution that we could actually have the practitioner more objective than ever, but also more efficient than ever. And what that meant was having an assessment system that did not require having to put on wearable sensors on the body. That's what the term markerless means. So we don't have to put any bands on the body. We don't have to put any markers and anything like that, which then obviously saves the practitioner a lot of time. The other issue with some of these systems where we have to place markers on the body is that now we're bringing subjectivity back into play. The practitioner placing the marker, one session, he may not place, or she may not place the marker in the same spot for the second session, which now we have inaccuracies that come into play. So the beautiful thing with the Kinect camera is the Kinect camera uses 3 different types of sensors to get its data. So it uses a sonar camera, which gives depth perception and maps the body. But it also uses infrared, which maps the heat distribution of the body, and a high definition camera. So these 3 cameras together, these 3 sensors, allows for a very accurate representation of human biomechanics and places the marker on the person reproducibly every single time at every single assessment. So that's what we mean by markerless motion capture. And the other great thing with this system, because it has the sonar, which is the depth perception, we can get overhead data from a single front-on facing camera. So this is something you cannot get this type of data with an iPhone app or some of these other products that are two-dimensional. Kinetisense with a single front-on facing camera shows the tilts in the frontal plane of the body, So the shoulder tilt left to right, the hip tilt left to right. But it also shows the rotation of the body from the overhead view without having to have an overhead camera. And what we found is that this overhead view is the view that is not analyzed. Anytime you have a practitioner that analyzes you visually for movement, they're not, or posture, they're not looking at that overhead view. Yet that's the plane that is the most important when it comes to compensations. The body will go into rotational torque to try to compensate for weakness in the hips or tightness in the low back or tightness in the front of our dominant shoulder from poor posture or working a desk job all of our lives. So that's the valuable data that Kinetisense can provide, and doing it without having to put on wearables and without having to have multiple cameras around the body. You can do this all with one single portable camera.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Now, you have a wide range of organizations using your system. Can you talk about the types that are using it and how they're using it?
Absolutely. And that's really the interesting thing with Kinetisense is when you're analyzing biomechanics, there are so many different fields that that it can be applied. From a business standpoint, it's a blessing, but it can somewhat be a curse. But we obviously try to concentrate on certain markets. But yeah, Kinetisense is being used around the world. We're in over 25 different countries currently. We are being used by medical doctors. We are being used by researchers. We were used in a Parkinson's study not too long ago. We're being used in a study right now for assessing individuals in wheelchairs. This study is being conducted in Poland. Kinetisense is also being used by Buurtzorg, and Buurtzorg is the largest geriatric assessment group in the world, based out of the Netherlands, and we've created a product with them for assessing risk of fall, so for balance. We also are being used widely by practitioners such as chiropractors and physiotherapists around the world, obviously for the clinical applications. Range of motion, posture, different things like this. But recently, we've really had a push into the fitness component with a new product that we have coming out called CAMS, which stands for the Kinetisense Advanced Movement Screen. We were chatting a little bit about that earlier in our call here, Phil, with being able to assess biomechanics, 7 movements that are evidence-based movements for function that the system captures 2,000 data points. So we've been getting into the fitness industry. We have a bunch of gym chains in North America that are very, very interested in incorporating this. And we've even had some very high-profile athletes and professional organizations, sports organizations using the system as well. Recently, the Miami Heat. So from anywhere from ergonomic assessment by corporations to the medical practitioner to the rehab practitioner to the fitness trainer, they're all using Kinetisense. And that really was the ultimate goal of Kinetisense, is bridging the gap, is what we call it. How do we get these different practitioners that are in different fields communicating? Right now, more than ever, rehab and functional medicine is very much a multidisciplinary approach, and it's impossible for these different groups to speak the same language if they're using different assessment tools.
Okay. Now let me switch gears a little bit and focus in on the client's point of view. How does a client benefit from the use of this technology? If I go to a clinic or a practitioner that has this, how am I going to benefit?
And that's a really, really good point. And that's one of the great advantages that we feel Kinetisense provides. So from a clinical standpoint, as a patient, if you're going in, and let's say that as a patient you've injured your shoulder and you're going in to get rehab on your shoulder and trying to improve range of motion that has pain. Your practitioner having Kinetisense is a huge advantage to you in a couple of different ways. First of all, the practitioner can see trends on your improvements or regressions over the course of treatment. Now, many practitioners have different types of treatments that they can employ or use on any given type of injury. And it's only if we have data and information on improvements or regressions that we can quickly move to a different type of treatment if we feel that's necessary, or move to a certain level of home care rehab or what have you. So this almost becomes it really becomes or gives the ability of the practitioner to move to the ideal treatments, to be able to change course if treatment is not working. Unfortunately, in one of the biggest issues that we have in rehabilitation is that practitioners will simply stick with the same type of treatment even if the treatment's not working. And it's not because they only have one treatment, it's because they don't have the data or the information to really track and make the proper decisions. So that's an important part. The other part of Kinetisense is that we've designed Kinetisense to involve the patient. So the patient can actually see themselves moving on the screen in real time. And what we found through research is having that patient involved in the process of the assessment actually increases the outcomes tremendously and also improves patient compliance. So when a patient,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, when a patient can see themselves in real time, or they see the graphs of their improvements, even if they're in pain, that makes them want to work hard at their home care, makes them want to stay true to the prescribed rehab plan of the practitioner, and therefore we get better outcomes. I do have an example of this from one of our users who's a physiotherapist in Los Angeles, who had a case of a patient that had frozen shoulder. And frozen shoulder is a problem that can occur and oftentimes over the age of 40 in women. It's very, very common, where all of a sudden the range of motion of the shoulder regresses quite quickly and the shoulder almost becomes stuck to one side. It's a very, very difficult condition to treat. And oftentimes as practitioners, we're looking for very, minute, small improvements over time. And this patient had been going to multiple different practitioners, and I'm sure the practitioners were helping her, but she was still in pain, and she didn't have the ability to see these small improvements she was making because they didn't have any tools to provide that data. This practitioner in Los Angeles that she went to go see did have Kinetisense, and over the course of treatment was able to take range of motion assessments and actually show a graph of improved range of motion and trending improved range of motion, which then she stayed with the treatment plan, and she worked hard at her home care because every time she'd come back, she'd be able to see these small changes and overall had a complete recovery. So that's an example of how technology, or how involving and incorporating the patient in the process can have a dramatic effect on the patient outcome. Without that technology, she may have jumped to another practitioner, or she may have just given up on rehabbing that shoulder altogether.
And that was the point I was going to make, is that compliance, because not all, you go to your physical therapy and then you still have exercise you have to do at home. And if you don't see progress, you sometimes don't do the things you have to do at home, and you don't get the outcome you want. And motivation and engagement are very, very critical to successful outcomes in rehabilitation. And the people that don't do it take longer to recover. And sometimes they never get the full range of motion or full functionality because they don't put in the work. And one reason they don't do it is they don't see progress. And so this is a great tool to get that immediate feedback, and you can get the visual verification rather than just getting a set of numbers, which is what, when I went through a number of surgeries and things like that for rehab, it was, well, you've improved this much, and it's just numbers. But seeing it can be very, very, very powerful for people.
It's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful for people, and it's one of the most overlooked aspects of rehabilitation, and it's the ability to really connect with that patient, and unfortunately, a lot of times technology can hinder that. But we feel that with the way that we've developed Kinetisense, that we actually promote that.
Now, Dr. Comeau, with most new technologies, they're usually met with a certain amount of concerns and reservations, some misconceptions. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions people may have had about your product, and how did they overcome them?
Yeah, and thank you. That's a great question. One of the biggest misconceptions that we have is that technology it's motion capture, 3D motion capture based is very, very expensive. And this comes from the fact that the Vicon system, which is a rehab or a research system, a 9-camera system, these are over $90,000 usually, and we see them in biomechanics labs. So a lot of practitioners know about these types of systems, and when they hear about clinical-based motion capture, they automatically feel that it's going to be out of their price point. The beautiful thing with Kinetisense is that we're using a camera that's available to the masses, and it is very affordable. The Kinect camera and these different motion-based cameras that we use are around the $100 to $140 price point, and then obviously having a Windows 10 computer, and then our software is about $120 per month. So incredibly affordable to have this type of research-based motion capture in the clinic or in the gym. So that was one of the biggest misconceptions that we see is that we're a product that would be unaffordable, and people are usually quite amazed when they hear our pricing, and then it's something that is palpable.
Well, that's good to know, because it is when you hear all the high tech and you get a little bit intimidated by say, oh my gosh, this is really, really high tech and there's a lot involved in this. And then you've used some, that were a product that are on the market for anybody can get. So that's going to be very reassuring for people to want to get in and provide their value for their patients and clients. Now, if Dr. Comeau, if people want to contact you or learn more about your company, where should they go?
The best way to contact our company would be online. Go to our website. There's lots of information on the website at www.kinetisense.com. Or you can also email us directly at info@kinetisense.com. And we have a wonderful staff here that would be more than willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, great. Well, Dr. Comeau, I want to thank you so much for sharing your information, your journey. I'm excited about seeing it in the Chicago area so that I can give it a try. But again, thank you very much for being on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I want to thank you for this opportunity, Phil. Anytime.
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, hosted by Phil Ferris. To learn more about the guests or resources on our show today, or to listen to past episodes, go to nevertoolateforfitness.com.